morning. I just went for a run and I thought maybe we would stretch and talk because it's been a while. So, you might want to strap, but you don't need one. And I'm probably going to keep my eyes closed most of the time because the sun is shining right in my face. So, I haven't been here for a while. I've been busy. Why don't we talk and stretch? So, we'll start lying down. And just begin with your knees together and your feet apart. So this sort of internal rotation here, especially if you've just done something like gone for a run, making some space around your sacrum, that bone down in your pelvic area at the back, and maybe even a little bit of windshield wipers here. I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at holding my core in every second that I'm running. And so I end up with an overarched lower back, pelvis tilts forward, and then I get kind of crunchy back here. So this feels really good. So I've been really busy, haven't been producing a lot of videos, but I've been very busy making things. I was fired from my longtime job of directing a yoga teacher training school and managing the facility a week before Thanksgiving. Let's go ahead and stretch our right leg up, and you can put the ball of your foot in your strap if you want, or you can hold your leg with your hands. And we're just going to kind of floss this muscle that runs down the side of your leg. I know it is fibularis, but it has a couple different names. But it runs like a stirrup under the sole of your foot, behind your ankle, up the side of your leg and across your knee. And so that can carry a lot of tension. So what we're going to do is use the strap, if you have it, to kind of turn your ankle in, so you're elongating that side of your lower leg. And then we're just going to kind of go back and forth here like we're flossing. So I lost my job unexpectedly right before the holidays, and that would be enough, except the person who fired me was my mom. So there's a whole nother 1,000 layers on top of that. And that's not the point of this story. It's just the reality, and that stuff happens, right? But what I've realized through that experience, because I've been in therapy now for, I guess, 4 years, maybe 3, pretty regularly, is all the stories that we make up in our mind about why things happen. And we do this as humans. Let's take this foot and cross it over, but keep your hip on the ground. So now we're going to bring that stretch up into the outer thigh, into the IT band. We do this as humans because we want to make sense of the world. It's a natural part of how our brains work. But what we learn in yoga is that that is the guise or the veil of delusion or Maya, the trap that we fall into without awareness. So last week, I was teaching a class at a specialty school for exceptional children. We're going to twist all the way across. And these kids are middle and high schoolers, and they have a wide array of exceptional things happening with them. And when I first came to the school, it's a 9-week session, I had about 7 kids in class. They were really excited about yoga. I talked about the chakras, and we decided collectively that we were going to do a series of the chakras, each week a different chakra. And then about 4 weeks in, there were auditions for a school play. And a number of these students wanted to be in the show and got in, which is wonderful. But the auditions are at the same time as clubs, and they couldn't really consistently come to yoga club. So I started feeling a certain way about these kids because they're teenagers, and I have my own experience as a teenager with being so afraid that people didn't like me. All the anxiety that I held as a teen bubbled up to the surface, and I thought, oh, these kids don't like what I have to offer. I am not doing a good enough job. Let's come back out of this twist and take this leg out to the side now. This leg can counterweight in this direction, bend it and open it, or you can leave it straight on the ground. So I tried to stay away from these thoughts of not good enough, they don't like this, I suck as a teacher. I've been working with kids since I was 13 years old. So that's a really long time because I'm 38 next month. So, and I love teens. I really do. They're just so open, and it's easy to connect with them if you listen to them and acknowledge them as people and treat them with respect. So I thought, oh, these kids don't really like this. And then last week I showed up to my class and nobody came. So I'm sitting there in the library where we normally have our class. We'll switch legs, ball the foot in the strap, and we're just going to go in and out with the ankle again. And I'm texting my husband saying, oh, nobody came. I guess nobody likes me. And I really started feeling like maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not as good with kids as I think I am. And then 15 minutes before the time ends, because I stayed the whole time because that's what I'm contracted to do. And I thought, well, maybe someone will come in late. One student comes in and says, I didn't know you were here. The door on the other side of the library was locked and I just found out and I'm so sorry. And, other people would have come, but they thought you weren't here today. And I had built up this whole story in my mind. Let's bring this leg across the midline without lifting the hip. So we get that nice yummy stretch here. Keep your glute on the ground. So I'd built this whole story up in my mind. These kids don't like me. I'm not very good. I'm going to cancel my children's yoga teacher training that I am offering this summer. And, I'm just reeling thoughts, as many of us do, especially those of us with anxiety. And none of it was true. None of it. And then I went home kind of feeling sheepish. We did 15 minutes of yoga, class was over. And then I thought, well, why do you do that to yourself? Let's twist. And then later that week, I found out that a friend of mine who I really wanted to work with, I had offered to share a space with this person in my new location that I'm setting up. And she seemed really open to it and excited about it. And then suddenly said, well, I'm going to do other things right now. I think I need a break from yoga and all that. Well, I found out a couple days ago that she's sharing space with someone else I know instead. And then I started making up stories in my mind about why that is and what I did wrong and how somebody must have said something and what was said and why does this person not talk to me and how did they feel. And when I allowed myself to feel those feelings and experience those thoughts as the observer and instead of acting on them, and calling my friend and being really angry and reactive, instead of quitting altogether and cutting them off and deciding, our friendship is over. When I allowed myself to feel those feelings and then stop thinking about it and give myself some grace to go about my life and worry about me, a few days later, I'm able to really think about the fact that this has nothing to do with me. Let's open this leg to the side. And the reason this person has made this choice is entirely what's going on in their life. Could be that they prefer to drive one direction instead of the other direction. It could be that they would rather be a friend than a business partner with me because they value our friendship so much, right? And it could be any number of reasons, but none of those reasons are my business. The way that I was let go from my job, I could just suffer over it for years and think about what happened and how it happened and what I could have done differently and how I could have controlled the situation. But I am not responsible for other people's choices. And I am not responsible for the circumstances around the events in my life. What I am responsible for is my relationship to those events, my relationship to those moments. And what yoga teaches us is that if we get quiet enough and we go inward, let's come out of this, and we drop this story that we're making up in our mind about all these things, and we remember that we're not the center of the universe, right? We are the most important person to ourselves. But each individual we come in contact with, they should be the most important person to themselves. And it's not a selfish act to act in your own best interests, to make choices that are best for you. That's not selfish. That's just human nature. It's preservation. It's what we do. And you might be a very giving, loving person who sacrifices a lot for other people because maybe your boundaries are a lot closer. Maybe you're comfortable with giving more. But you can't be upset with other people if they're not comfortable with the same things you are. And so what we do, and I see this a lot in meditation, let's come up to our hands and knees, is students, and I'm a victim of this too. I'll turn this way. I'm talking into the microphone. We'll do some cat and cows. But we go into a deep meditation and some memory or thought or emotion bubbles up because we're getting quiet and we're sitting with no distraction. And we get really uncomfortable with this idea of this thought or this memory. And we come out of that meditation, usually stepping forward, maybe open this leg to the side. And I'm constantly having students say, I had a thought that was very scary, or I don't like meditation because it brings me to a dark place. Or they ask, I saw this color, or I had this vision. What does it mean? And they ask me to interpret that for them as their teacher. And what we need to realize is that our mind naturally wants to connect the dots and say, okay, I had this thought or this vision. What does it mean? I have to assign meaning to it. And this is not to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not to be depressing. Let's straighten that leg. But things don't have as much meaning as we think. Sometimes an event, an experience, a thought is just something that we're having. And it doesn't have to have a big story attached to it. And we don't have to define ourselves by that thought or that experience or that feeling. And it doesn't mean that we aren't allowed to have that feeling or that thought or ride the wave of emotions, because that's what being a human is. Let's bend this knee and we'll do a little pigeon pose. But it's when we attach ourselves to that thought, that emotion, that experience, and we define our entire personality by that one thing or those number of small things, that's when we get into trouble. That's when we're living in a state of Maya or illusion. And that keeps us from liberation. And the whole point of yoga is to let go of that, to drop that, to be mindful of the story you are telling yourself, and to remember the reality is that in the end, that doesn't matter so much. In the end, the only person you are responsible for and the only thing you have control over is you and how you relate to the world. It's not what happens to you. And I've wasted so much, wasted is not the right word. I have spent so much time in my life trying to navigate and control and manage, is what my therapist calls it, manage the people around me, because I don't like being uncomfortable. Let's sit this hip down and take the back leg and bring it around in front. Do a little cow face pose. I don't like being uncomfortable. Who does, right? I specifically do not like being uncomfortable. I have aversion to discomfort. Diagnosed, apparently. It's a thing. So when I have those moments where that aversion bubbles up, where an uncomfortable moment is happening, I'm about to confront somebody, or I'm in the middle of a conflict, or I have to do the thing I really don't want to do and face the yucky stuff, I give myself compassion and remember that I am experiencing one thing, but that's in the mental layer of my 5 koshas. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch sides. So if you want to do this a fancy way, I'm going to take this leg that's on the top, put it on the ground, and then just turn the other way. And now this is the front leg, right? So other leg forward in your lunge. Slide this knee back. You can open that leg if you want. So we have the 5 koshas. This is where yoga therapy comes in to the practice of yoga. These are the layers we exist in. There's the physical layer on the outside, all the stuff we experience in the physical body. The energetic layer underneath that, I talk about this often. And then the mental layer. And the mental layer is where we make up those stories. And those are based on our experience. Straighten that leg. Nobody else has the same experience as us. Nobody else has the same body, the same thoughts, the same moment-to-moment life. And so it makes perfect sense that we would connect the dots and say, well, this happened before, and the result was this. So now that this is happening again, it's natural to assume the result will be the same. It's not, right? And so the more we practice this self-study, we'll bend this knee, come into pigeon pose, and really think about asking yourself in those moments when you're suffering, am I making up a story in my mind about this? And it doesn't matter if the story is true or not, right? When I was let go from my job, I had met with my therapist ahead of time and said, I'm thinking about resigning as manager, asking to stay on as a teacher. I've been thinking about it for a long time. We worked on it for about a year leading up to that. How should I do it? What's the most respectful way? What should I say? What am I comfortable with, continuing to give? What am I not comfortable with and why? And all those are personal choices for personal reasons, right? And my therapist said, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I said, well, the worst thing that can happen is that my mom fires me, but she'd never do that. And then it happened. The worst thing I could fantasize about in my mind at the time happened. And what's interesting is it hurt. I was really sad. I allowed myself to be sad. I'm still grieving a lot of different things. But also, I allowed myself to really think about the fact that I survived that. It didn't kill me. That uncomfortable, sad thing, that scary thing of losing your job and having all your relationships change in a moment and being out of control over that. And then the self-blame that might follow about how I decided to ask for that change and why it backfired. I could theorize that all day long. Let's step back to downward dog. But does that bring me any benefit at all? Does that change what happened? Absolutely not. And so the fact is, I lived. It didn't create any physical harm to go through that uncomfortable experience. Oh, we didn't do our cow face pose on that side. We'll do it now. And so from that lesson, that really uncomfortable lesson, we'll bring this back leg around, I learned that I can survive uncomfortable things, that I will be okay in the end, right? And even if it was something that happened to me that was physical, one of the things I can relate that to that is physical is I had a miscarriage. This is when I started therapy. It was after my miscarriage a couple of years ago. And that's a physical experience you're completely out of control of, and there's so much trust you have to build back up with your body when it does something that is unexpected, where you have that feeling of, my body has failed me, and there's so much blame, and there's so many layers of grief and anger and frustration and all of this, and it takes time to build that back up. And then in the end, you think, okay, but I lived through that too. Right? I have a very dear friend, and with her permission, I usually talk about her in my Yoga for Amputees presentation. Let's fold forward. And she lost a leg in college. There was an accident, car accident, and she lost her leg. And I don't know if she practices yoga, but I can tell you she's one of the most enlightened people I've ever known. Because from the very minute that happened, you can see on her Facebook posts throughout the years, this thread of grace of what do I have to learn from this experience, and what do I still have the ability to do? And looking for the light in those moments is one of the ways that we can rise above that layer of illusion, that we can remind ourselves that we don't have to tell ourselves this story. The story we're telling ourselves doesn't have to be sad, it doesn't have to be painful. We can be sad, we can experience pain, but we don't have to entertain that and follow it into some convoluted labyrinth of story that we've made up about what might happen or what could have been. And so for me, the way that I get through that, bring our feet together, is really just asking myself, what's real here? What's actually true? What is true? I don't have a job. What am I going to do about it? I'll be sad for a while, and then eventually I'll start to explore and throw some darts in the air and see what happens, right? What is true? Nobody came to my class that day. What can I do about it? Well, sitting in the library pouting about it probably wasn't a good idea, right? Because had I gone to the office and said, can you make an announcement? Is it, possible that A, B, or C has happened? I could have changed the experience, right? So I learned from that. So next time I make a different choice. Next time I have the experience where a friend from the outside looks like they are not going to connect with me in a way that I'm hoping for. My friend is choosing not to share space with me. I have choices, right? What I don't want to do is make up a big story about why this person doesn't like me anymore, because I tried that. It didn't work. What I might do instead is reach out and ask, or maybe let it go. and let them have their space, because it's not about me, right? So each time one of these moments comes up in our life, we really got to ask ourselves, number one, what is the story I'm telling about? And is it true? And can I move forward telling myself a story that my whole video is going to be ruined because there's a helicopter, right? It's not true. What is the story I'm telling myself? Is that story true? What parts of it are true? What parts of it may not be true? What am I making up? And I don't really have any valid information as to whether or not that's true. And then what am I going to do about it? Knowing now what I know. And if this happens again, what would I do moving forward? And getting really quiet and allowing yourself to meditate and sit with your feelings and fully experience them, but not attach yourself to them, not define yourself by them, is really what the goal is of yoga, of all of this. So I hope there's something there for you, a little nugget of something that you can take with you and give some thought to. And I hope you're having a beautiful day. It's very sunny here, but a lovely morning. I'm going to go about my day and continue moving forward and be mindful of my thoughts. What is the illusion? And how do I sink under it? What tools do I have? Do I meditate? Do I go to therapy? Do I journal? What do you have? Do you go for a run to get clarity, to drop the illusion? And that's what brings us to enlightenment. So that's all I have for you today. But with lots of love and respect, I wish you well, and I'll see you next time. Namaste.